Good morning. Welcome to another episode of Legislative Matters Now with M&M. I'm Melissa Southall, Self-Advocate Coordinator for the ARC and People First.
And I'm Morgan Spicer, Special Projects Coordinator with the ARC of the Mid-Ohio Valley. Thank you so much for joining us. The purpose of this show is to educate self-advocates, and anyone for that matter, on the important topic of legislative advocacy. Now, every month, Melissa and I take a piece of legislation and explain it in an easy-to-understand manner and why it is so important.
We also speak to a self-advocate in our Advocate in Action segment, as they talk about how they are using their self-advocacy skills to help themselves or others live a more independent life, just like everyone else. To begin the show, we have a segment titled Who You Gonna Call? Because when you have a question about a legislative issue, you want to make sure you call the right person so you can get the results you want.
It could be a city council member, a state lawmaker, a member of Congress, or an expert in the topic you're concerned about. For the past few episodes, we have talked about the constitutional amendments that are going to appear on the November ballot this year. Now, to find out which one we're discussing today and who we'll discuss it with, here is this month's Who You Gonna Call?
Welcome to Who You Gonna Call? Today, you want to learn more about Amendment 4 on the November ballot concerning the West Virginia State Supreme Court. Who are you going to call? Your city council member, your state House of Delegates or state senators, your U.S. senator or U.S. Congress members, or a state agency that specializes in what you are looking for. Okay, Melissa, what do you think? A, B, C, or D?
So the last 3 episodes, we have talked to state senators, so that's why I think that it's B.
All right. How about you, Morgan?
I agree with Melissa. We have spoken to several of them over the course of a few episodes, so I think I'm going to leave my answer with B.
The answer is B. You are both correct, a state senator. Amendment 4 that will be on the ballot in November states that courts have no authority or jurisdiction to intercede or intervene or interfere with impeachment proceedings of the House of Delegates or the Senate, and specifying that a judgment rendered by the Senate following an impeachment trial is not reviewable by any court of this state. Any officer of the state may be impeached or for maladministration, corruption, incompetency, gross immorality, neglect of duty, or any high crime or misdemeanor. The House of Delegates has the sole power of impeachment. The Senate has the sole power to try impeachments, and no person shall be convicted without the concurrence of 2/3 of the members elected thereto. When sitting as a court of impeachment, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Appeals, or if any cause it be improper for him or her to act, then any other judge of that court to be designated by it shall preside, and the senators shall be on oath or affirmation to do justice according to the law and evidence. Judgment in cases of impeachment does not extend further than removal from office and disqualification to hold any office of honor, trust, or profit under the state, but the party convicted remains liable to indictment, trial, judgment, and punishment according to law. The Senate may sit during the recess of the legislature for the trial of impeachments. No court of this state has any authority or jurisdiction, by writ or otherwise, to intercede or intervene in or interfere with any impeachment proceedings of the House of Delegates or the Senate conducted hereunder, nor is any judgment rendered by the Senate following a trial of impeachment reviewable by any court of this state.
There are 4 constitutional amendments on the upcoming November ballot. To discuss this amendment and how it got on the ballot, we will be speaking to West Virginia State Senator Ryan Weld. He is a Republican senator representing Brooke County and is currently the majority whip. Thank you, Senator Weld, for joining us today and explaining this amendment in an easy-to-understand manner.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Could you please explain this amendment and what it will do?
Sure. So the amendment that will be on the ballot this fall regarding impeachment proceedings and separation of power in the state of West Virginia stems from the decision in 2018, the Workman v. Carmichael decision that stemmed from the impeachment proceedings that were then ongoing in the West Virginia legislature. And we'll get into that in a little bit, but this amendment, what it will do, it will clarify that the impeachment proceedings in the legislature are the sole power of the legislative branch. And that has always been the case in the state of West Virginia and every state around the country, and at the federal level as well, that the legislative branch has sole authority over impeachment proceedings. This amendment, as a result of the Workman v. Carmichael decision that we'll discuss in a little bit, clarifies that and makes absolutely crystal clear that that is the case in the state of West Virginia, that the West Virginia legislature has sole authority over all impeachment proceedings in the state of West Virginia.
What happened that caused the legislature to decide the state constitution needed amended?
So what happened was, and if you remember back in 2018, several members of the state Supreme Court, our state Supreme Court, were impeached. And a lot of times people have, are a little bit of, aren't sure what the term impeached means or what it means to impeach an official. And so an impeachment is not a conviction, or it means that you have to be removed from office. An impeachment simply means that the charges have been brought against an official, an elected official or an appointed official by the lower house, by the House of Delegates. And so several members of the Supreme Court, stemming from issues regarding around spending and other things, several members of the West Virginia Supreme Court were impeached, had charges brought against them by the West Virginia House of Delegates. What then happens is that those individuals who have been charged comes to the Senate, and the Senate holds the trial in that matter. And so those are that impeach, and I'll read you the Constitution as it stands right now. It says, the House of Delegates shall have the sole power of impeachment. The Senate shall have the sole power to try impeachments. No person shall be convicted without the concurrence of 2/3 of the members elected thereto. Following the House impeaching several members, and before the Senate could hold a trial, then Justice Workman sued the members of the Senate, specifically naming Mitch Carmichael, who was then the Senate president. And that's why it's the Workman v. Carmichael decision. A substitute court was then named by Justice Workman. That substitute court then, and I will put this in, I'm a lawyer, and so I can't understate the violence and the wreckage that Workman v. Carmichael decision had upon our state constitution by saying that it is not the sole power of the legislature to impeach and try officials. That for the first time, perhaps in our nation's history, the judicial branch intervened and prohibited a legislative branch from moving forward with its sole constitutional authority of impeaching and trying public officials. And so it interjected itself into those proceedings, I think, in violation of our Constitution, in violation of prior rulings, because just in 2010, the official West Virginia State Supreme Court said that courts have no authority to interfere with proceedings of either house of the West Virginia legislature. And so what their issue was is that they said that the House did not follow its own rules during the impeachment proceedings against those members of the Supreme Court. Well, that may be the case. That might have been the case, but it was not for the court to decide. It was for the Senate to decide as the sole trier of those charges made against those Supreme Court justices. It was not for a separate branch of the government to make that decision. And that is why we have the separation of powers, both at the federal level and at the state level. And so this constitutional amendment goes to fix, again, the violence done to the state constitution, to our state constitution, by the substitute court in the Workman v. Carmichael decision.
Just like a lot of legislation, this didn't get approved to be placed on the ballot the first time around. Can you talk about the work that went on to finally bring it before the voters in November?
Well, so back in 2019, the Senate adopted this amendment. And so I guess I'll very quickly give a little, when a constitutional amendment is proposed in the state of West Virginia, what happens is that it is put forth in a resolution that needs to be adopted by each house of the legislature, both the House of Delegates and the Senate. But it's not just a simple majority like a piece of legislation, it's a 2/3 majority. And so back in 2019, the Senate adopted the resolution to be able to put forth this constitutional amendment by the required 2/3. But then the House, while it had a simple majority, I believe it was 54 votes to adopt, it didn't have that 2/3 majority. Now, I can't remember, and I don't even know if it was really ever stated why the House didn't adopt the amendment or the resolution, but just the following year, or in 2021, so 2 sessions later, in HJR 2, House Joint Resolution 2, it was adopted by a 2/3 majority of both the House and the Senate. So I don't know what changed for the House. The House is going to, they're going to do whatever they do. Sometimes it takes them a little bit longer to get to where we all were. And this is an instance of that. And it is what it is. And so it was adopted by 2/3 of the bodies in 2021 and will be on the ballot this fall.
Obviously, since it didn't make it to the ballot the first time, not everyone thinks this is a good idea. What do you say to people who may think this is not a good idea?
So whatever an individual may think about the impeachment proceedings surrounding our Supreme Court back in 2018, whether you think that it was all frivolous or whether you think that those justices or certain justices did nothing wrong and it should have never been brought against them in the first place, whatever your position is on that shouldn't carry over to be your position on this amendment. Because this amendment, in my mind, is absolutely necessary in order to restore the proper checks and balances that we have through the separation of powers in our state constitution. I cannot, again, understate, or I cannot overstate the violence that was done to our Constitution through that decision by the substitute court. And so whatever you may think of the impeachment proceedings, if you truly believe in the Constitution, the separation of powers, the what comes under the sole purview of the legislative branch, the judicial branch, and the executive branch, this amendment that has been proposed absolutely must be ratified by the state.
Is there anything else you would like to add about the amendment?
Just that how important it is for this amendment to be adopted and ratified by the voters this fall in order to restore the constitutional authority of the legislative branch and to restore the checks and balances of our separation of powers that we have on all levels of government, both federal and state. It is imperative that the voters see that and just how important it is to our system of government to have that separation of powers under our Constitution restored that was taken away by the Workman v. Carmichael decision.
Anything else you'd like to add about being the majority whip? And has that proven to be an interesting position?
So if you're anything like my mom, you're very excited that I'm the majority whip, but you really have no idea what the majority whip is. So what my job as whip is to count votes, to count noses, because we have 60 days for our legislative session to get the things done that we need to get done. And so we can't waste our time on issues or bills that we don't have a majority vote for that aren't going to pass on the floor. And so it's my job to count those votes and make sure that we have at least 18 to move forward to be able to pass a piece of legislation. And so I do see it as my job to count those votes and know where we're at, but I don't see it being my job to tell people how they should vote. Their vote is between them and themselves and the people that they represent. And so I always tell people, and I borrowed this line from a television show, to vote your conscience, vote your district, just don't surprise me. Because I can't have people saying, oh, I'm with you. I'm voting yes on this. And then they change their mind between the conversation I had with them and when we vote on the floor, and now all of a sudden we lose a bill. We just don't. Excuse me, we don't have time for that. And so it's not my job to tell someone how they should vote. That's between them and their constituents. But it is my job to be able to count those votes to know that we have enough for a bill to pass. And so I've been the whip now since my first full session was the 2018 session, which was my second one in the Senate. And I truly enjoy the job. You know, I take my job very seriously. And so I make it very clear to our members as I have discussions with them about, you know, their votes and how they feel on an issue, that those discussions that I have with them are between the two of us. And you know, I treat them with you know, the confidentiality that I treat my conversations with my clients here as a lawyer, so that they feel confident that they can be honest and open with me. And I feel that I get better, you know, feedback from them on legislation if they know that conversation stays between the two of us. And so when the Senate president or the majority leader asks me, you know, how many votes do we have on this? If I have a couple of no's, I will just tell them, you know, we have 3 no's or 4 no's. But until the person who is the no vote tells me, please tell them, you know, that I am a no vote, then, you know, I withhold the names just so that people feel that they, you know, can come to me and speak comfortably and in confidence.
Last question. We always encourage our viewers to be involved by making sure they register to vote as well as write to their lawmakers. Any advice about either of those 2 ways to participate in how state government is run?
So I think it's extremely important that people, if they have something that they see during the legislative session or outside of the session that concerns them, that maybe it's a bill or maybe they're having an issue here at home, maybe it's an issue with DMV or the tax office, that kind of thing. I think it's very important that people reach out to their elected officials because, you know, at the end of the day, we work for you. You're our boss. And, you know, I have 105,000 bosses here in the 1st senatorial district, and I take that very seriously. And so think of it in terms of the job that you have day to day. If your boss called you and you never called them back, how long do you think you'd have that job? Probably not very long. And so I take it very seriously that when my constituents reach out to me because they have an issue, that I reach out back to them, whether through email or Facebook, or they, you know, give me a call. You know, I do my best each and every day to make sure that I return those calls or those emails or those messages because they have legitimate concerns and they should be heard.
Do you have a preference on how you'd like to be contacted?
I would say, that, you know, outside of the session, like right now, email is probably the best way because, you know, I have the opportunity. I came in the office this morning and I went through my legislative emails and returned a few and forwarded a few on that I'll need some assistance with from, you know, someone else. But during the session, it gets a little more difficult because, you know, our day starts at 7:30 and goes till, you know, pretty late at night. And so a lot of times I think the best then is, you know, for people to call my office in Charleston because I have an assistant that is there day to day with me and she can take those calls and give me some messages, but also, you know, relay information back to people or put them in touch with the right, you know, state office to get them help on an issue. And so it kind of changes, you know, in and out of session for me.
Thank you so much, Senator Weld, for talking with us today.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Remember, if you have a legislative issue you would like Melissa and I to explore further, or you want to be featured in a future Advocate in Action segment, let us know. You can call the office at 304-422-3151. You could also email us as well. My email address is morgan.spicer@thearcmov.org.
I can be reached at melissa.southall@peoplefirstwv.org. We would love to hear from you and have you as a future guest on the show. Next is our Advocate in Action segment. Today's guest is Tina Tanner, who is an active member of her local People First group and has been for over 30 years. She is also the president of her local People First chapter. Thank you so much for joining us today, Tina, and welcome to the show.
I appreciate you having me here.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm 57. I've been living in Parkersburg for all my life. I live by myself and I pay my own bills and my own rent. And I've been in People First for almost 30 years.
How did you first discover People First, and what do you like about it?
Well, when I first found out about it, I was working at SW Resources, and I keep seeing people going out of this little building behind the SW Resources before they moved to the Deal Center. And I like it because it shows people with disabilities that can live on their own and take care of themselves. Before that, I never knew about that.
What has been the benefit of joining People First?
One is to speak up for yourself and the others. That's when I first started the People First conferences and stuff. And it shows me how to speak up for myself, how to show, and it shows me how to go to the legislators and stuff like that and talk for what we need for the people with disabilities.
So had you not been a member of People First, how would your life be different?
Well, if it wasn't for the People First, I would have not been able to live on my own or to advocate for myself.
So what kind of things over the years have you advocated for? Take us back and talk about some of the things that have happened that you have had to use your self-advocacy skills to keep living independently.
Well, I lived, like I said, I pay my own bills and rent. I also, I shop for myself. Even if I don't drive, I have my brother or my sister take me to grocery stores. I also have, and I could go to the People First meetings, which I am the president, and it also helps out. I also go to the Capitol every year, and I have been going there for the last 30 years. Well, make it 29 years. And I have been, if I hadn't met it, I would have been still living with my parents. I lived with my parents there for up till I was about 27. I told them that I wanted a place of my own since I've been working out in the community. I was working at Public Debt at that time, and I was making pretty good money, and I wanted to get an apartment of my own so my parents wouldn't have to drive me back and forth to work. And then this way I could walk to work where I was living at, or take the bus. Well, where I live at now, I got online looking for the apartments. At first it was supposed to be for me and my nephew and his girlfriend. Then I got it just for me, and it's I looked it up, I filled out the application. I called them and they sent me the application. The apartment wasn't really finished until November. It started in July and August of 2020. And then I moved in December of this year. I like my new apartment, and it's got washer and dryer hookup. I have a dishwasher, whatever I need in there. I don't have to go and save money to go to the laundromat and have my brother or my sister to take me all the time. I have my own washer and dryer, and I buy my own stuff to use in the washer and dryer. I use the transit authority. Where I live at, I have to walk to the bus stop, and it's good exercise that I need. And I just get up and walk. It's about 1.5 miles from where I live, but I love it. It gets me out and about and gets me out of the apartment for a while. With where I live at, it's further from the bus stop. Plus, I also have it's all on one floor. I don't have to go any steps to get into my apartment, which there is like a three stories apartment building, and I'm on the first floor, which I like. And also it's a very friendly neighborhood. It was a good thing for me to move.
You mentioned You are the president of your local People First chapter. Talk about your role as president.
The officer, being a president of the People First, you have to call people, make sure that the meeting is running right. It gives other people a chance to run too, but it's hard. You have to know how to run a meeting for the people that you're in the meeting with. I learned how to run a meeting by going to the conferences and taking the classes that just shows you how to be a president of the People First. And I also was a treasurer of the board of the People First. And I also was that's about it, about the president and the treasurer. You can be an officer. You don't have to be the president. You can be the secretary, treasurer, sergeant at arms. And it's your participation in the meeting that would help a lot with the people with disabilities.
Why do you think it is important to speak to your lawmakers?
Going to Charleston, I've been to Charleston, and it is really a nice place to be, to see your lawmakers, like your senators, your governors. And I also been to the Washington, D.C. and met with the Senator Manchin there and McKinley. If you speak to them directly, they can put your story in, that you can tell them what you need and people around you need. It also helps you. It helps them knowing what is important to you and your group and your people that you represent.
Now, we've talked about the importance of voting, and since we go to the polls in November to vote, what are some of your experiences of being registered to vote, and why is it so important?
If you don't get your voice in, then you don't have to say who's being elected into the office. And if it's important, even with people with disability, needs their voice in voting and register. If you don't know how to register, just go on the website and they'll have the registration forms on there.
Is there anything else you would like to add?
I just was saying I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to be in People First. It gets me out of the house, gets me to do things outside of what I usually won't be doing, meeting people. And I made friends over the years going to conferences and meetings and stuff. That's what I liked about People First, get to meet new people at every conference.
Thank you so much, Tina, for taking the time to speak to us today and the contributions that you have made in your local People First chapter over the course of your 30-year tenure.
Thank you.
Remember, if you'd like to be featured on a future segment of Advocate in Action and are using your self-advocacy skills in your life or the lives around you, we would love to have you on the show. You can call the ARC at 304-422-3151, or you can email me and Melissa directly. My email address is morgan.spicer@thearcmov.org.
And mine is melissa.southall@peoplefirstwv.org. We would love to have you on the show. With that, we are out of time for this month's episode. We would like to thank West Virginia State Senator Ryan Weld, as well as our Advocate in Action, Tina Tanner.
We would also like to acknowledge that Tina Tanner is also a member of the Board of Directors for the ARC in the Mid-Ohio Valley, just like we encourage all of you to step up and join a border committee. So thank you so much for joining us today, and remember, advocacy matters.
And so do you. See you next time.